Hello, I'm Don Rojas, Executive Director of Free Speech TV, and I'm delighted to be joined today in our studios here in Denver by author David Wolman. David is the author of a very provocatively titled book called The End of Money. I think this is just a great headline, David, and it tells me that you both an author and a journalist. And the book itself actually is the culmination of a journalistic journey that you took to many countries around the world. And along the way, you ran into a variety of colorful characters. Some you call counterfeiters, some you call preachers, techies, dreamers. And then you talk about the coming cashless society. And I want us to dig into the cashless society a little bit more. But tell us about the origins of the book, first of all, and the journey that began the journalism that ended up being in the book.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. A few years ago, I was reading about the costs of manufacturing pennies and nickels. At the moment, we're looking at about 2.5 cents per penny and around 10 or 11 cents per nickel. Of course, from day to day, it depends on the spot price of the constituent metals, but to anybody who has sort of a rational streak, that's crazy talk.
It doesn't make sense.
And I was seeing some stories about this in the newspapers, and there was a campaign to retire the penny that is still kicking, by the way, here in the States. But the people behind this effort were being sufficiently mocked by Stephen Colbert and in the pages of the Wall Street Journal, and I sort of wanted to jump in the fray somehow. So I discussed an idea of a short essay with my editor at Wired, and we decided to kind of amp up the bluster and call for the end of cash, period. Mm-hmm. And you know, so much of our lives nowadays already exists in the digital realm. Books and movies and music, why not cash? This is a technology, and yet it is a technology that hasn't really changed in quite some time. Except maybe some souped up anti-counterfeiting features, what have you, but still, it's these little physical objects. Right. So I wrote this short essay, and the response was enormous and not very sunny from a lot of people. People are angry at the idea, even though to a great extent we have already pushed cash to near the edge of this cliff. Right. But there's a little bit more space left, and so I wanted to wander over to the edge of that cliff and say, well, maybe we should push it over. And people went bananas. Yeah, yeah. So right away I thought, wow, what is the story with this emotional response to cash's fate? Right. And to me, that signaled that this might be a worthy book topic.
Well, you touched a sensitive chord, because cash has such a historical and emotional role to play in the culture. I mean, the pictures of past presidents are on our notes.
Right.
And our coins. So there's that whole historical connection. You know, if you have a lot of cash in your pocket, your self-esteem, you know, this is in the old school days.
Yes, yes.
you had a high self-esteem because you had a lot of cash in your wallet. So, you know, there was that kind of historical value to cash. You're saying now, as technology inevitably moves forward, we are heading into a cashless society and more into an electronic currency society.
Right, and to a large extent we are already there. And the idea is not to prematurely rush to the cashless future, because people depend on cash tips for income. Right. Because what will you do in a disaster scenario when the power grid is off and all our mobile phone batteries have failed? So the idea is more to subject cash to some scrutiny, because nobody ever does. I mean, who doesn't love money?
Well,
we're so wired to love this stuff.
In the financial world.
Exactly. So the idea here for me was to put cash in the hot seat a little bit, because it's expensive, much more so than people realize. But to get back to your other point briefly, you know, you're absolutely right. Not only are we completely wired to love this stuff, psychologically speaking, but cash is so intertwined with our cultures, and not just this culture, you know, all over the world. In Japan, you have to give crisp new banknotes for certain holiday gifts. At a Persian wedding, you throw coins in the air, and et cetera. So all over the world. And of course, you know, for those of us here in the States, that very first tooth that you lose and you plunge your hand under the pillow, there's that special little metal feeling. There's nothing like it. So that's, in a way, that's what I'm up against.
Yes, yes. No, you're up against an enormous historical tradition, but you're making some fascinating arguments in the book. You talk about the cost of cash. What do you mean by that, David? What do you mean by the cost of cash?
Right. Well, there are a number of different levels. The simple initial level is just the manufacturing cost. You know, it costs a lot of money right now to make a nickel, or more than the value stamped onto the object. Not so for a $1 bill, whether it's 7 or 9 cents per dollar bill or a $100 bill. That's still a winning proposition for central banks. But still, you have to mine the materials and produce the materials, make the stuff. Then there is so-called cash maintenance in society. That is making sure that cash registers everywhere are stocked for you and me. The rough estimate for that number is about $150 billion a year, about 3 times the budget of the Department of Education. Mm-hmm. That's just making the stuff, moving the stuff, securing the stuff, inspecting it, pulling it from circulation and shredding it when it's too tired looking, and then making some new ones. That's just maintenance. Then when you sort of step to the next level, you start to look at the cost of cash, because cash is the currency of crime. Mm-hmm. So you have tax evasion. Mm-hmm. For example, the tax gap is the gap between what Americans owe and what they pay. Mm-hmm. And the estimate right now for that number is about $400 to $500 billion every year. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, not all of that is because of cash. You can evade your taxes. I'm happy to report. You can evade your taxes electronically, but yes, a lot of it is because of cash.
Just tell the Wall Street tycoons a little bit about that.
They certainly know how to do that. Then you have cash as the currency of crime for counterfeiting, obviously, mm-hmm. In the war on drugs. I mean, whatever mm-hmm. one's opinion of the war on drugs or mm-hmm. the question of legalizing marijuana, at present, we still have to pay the cops to go chase down the people involved in this trade, and of course the currency of that trade is cash.
It's cash.
And you know, prostitution and pretty much any crime you can imagine. Mm-hmm. Right now, about 70% of U.S. $100 bills, they live overseas. Mm-hmm. They're not actually contributing mm-hmm. or greasing commerce here at home. They're just stored in security boxes or steel briefcases of Russian mobsters elsewhere. And you know, this is your greenback hard at work. Right, so these are some of the costs. I wanted to at least kind of needle the establishment a little and ask that question.
The almighty dollar doesn't factor into your thinking here.
The almighty dollar, in places it really does. You know, I do recognize that this is, you know, it's one of the last physical touchstones of our national identity. Mm-hmm. One commenter wrote to me and said, you know, getting rid of the greenback is like burning the flag on the steps of the Capitol. You know, I don't necessarily subscribe to that idea, but I understand what they're talking about. You know, there's a woman I speak to in the book in Iceland. I traveled there in the wake of their banking collapse to investigate the fate of the Icelandic krona and look at their economy, but through this particular lens of cash. Yeah. So I met the woman there who designed their banknotes. Yeah. Kirsten Thorkelsdottir is her name, uh-huh. and she said to me, you know, this is heritage you can hold in your hand. And yet, then when I asked the next question, which was, well, if you guys ever go to the euro, or if we ever get rid of cash entirely, you know, what will we lose? Will that be tragic? Will Iceland be any less Icelandic? And she was so practical about the whole thing. She said, no, if the value proposition isn't there, if it just doesn't make sense to have this stuff around, we should get rid of it. We'll probably still be Icelandic without the krona, mm-hmm, just like mm-hmm. the French are still rather French without the euro.
And David, you do make a number of pragmatic and logical arguments for the elimination of cash. But I got to tell you, there are also some downsides to it, and I think you recognize those downsides, and such as, you know, there are at least 2 billion human beings on our planet right now whose lives depend on the use of cash every single day. Right. And that's a third of humanity right there. Right. Okay. Right. That's not inconsequential by any means. And then you also talk about the. I also want to push back on you a little bit and ask you, how do you explain the lack of access of that 1/3 of humanity to electronic money? Right,
right. Well, this is really the most revelatory part of the whole project for me, because at first glance, this whole idea looks very elitist. You know, only wealthy people who have smartphones can enjoy the fun of transacting mm-hmm. electronically through text-like interaction. In fact, it's just the opposite. Cash is the enemy of the poor because they are trapped only using cash.
It's fascinating.
What I mean by that,
Yeah.
it's a complicated idea to explore, but the Gates Foundation economist who I profile in the book kind of unpacks this elegantly, I think. And what he's talking about is the fact that cash creates friction in our economic lives. For you and me, it's not so punitive, but if you really wanted to have some cash on hand before going out to dinner tonight, you get to an ATM and you get some cash.
Right.
That costs you in time and effort and the risk of carrying cash around, but it's not crushing. For the poor,
plus you pay a fee for that
you
transaction.
might pay a fee, exactly. So, and economists go after this. They go after those kind of numbers. So it's not free, and it's not friction-free. For the poor, cash is crushing because they have no way to convert their wealth into electronic form. So what does that mean? The first thing it means is that when all of your wealth is stored on your person or in your apartment in a tea canister, first of all, it's subject to theft or destruction or extortion right off the bat. The second issue is that everyone you know is making claims on that money.
Yeah.
Some horrible, the drunk uncle, because of course in the developing world it's almost always women who are looking after the family finances. So you have the drunk uncle or the abusive spouse grabbing at the pot.
The majority of the micro financiers in India are women.
Exactly, exactly. So you have those people grabbing at the pot. Then you have all of these people who live near you who are making legitimate claims on that money. So-and-so's kid needs a new pair of shoes, or someone needs some medicines. Short-term things that are pressing and real. The problem is you are trying to save to send a child to school, to buy farm equipment, to buy a moped, the kind of investment that would help you climb out of poverty and stay out of poverty. To do that, it's really hard to do that saving, to build financial stability without a savings account in the old-fashioned, uber-boring sense of banking as a safe and secure place to store your wealth. So when you are stuck using only cash, you have to, some people in poor parts of the world, they actually pay someone else to hold their money for them. Right? They're not earning interest, they're paying out. Or even here in the States where people have to use a check cashing service, they get charged terrible fees for that.
But David, not to interrupt you, but the converse of that is beginning to become more and more evident in developing societies like India and in societies in Africa. That is to say, more and more people are using cell technology as a financial instrument.
Exactly. Well, and that you are refuting your own point, I guess. In a way, this is not at all about further punishing the 2 billion people out there who subsist on $2 a day, right? Because they are trapped in cash. If you can get the poor using their phone as a means to transact and as an access point for the banking sector and the formal economy, then you pull them into the fold so that they have better tools at their disposal to build the financial stability that they're talking about. You and I, we might not have as much money as we would like saved up to buttress against financial shock, but we have some. We also have credit so that if we ran into financial shock, we could borrow some in the short term to deal with that. But the poor, let me just finish this point.
Okay.
The poor can't buttress against those financial shocks. So as soon as you break an ankle, or your scooter breaks down and you can't get to the factory, or someone gets sick, you have a flood, all of those things, you have nothing saved up to prevent against those kind of shocks. And these are some of the ideas that I was trying to spotlight in the book, because it's so counterintuitive to think that cash is the enemy of the poor, when it is, absolutely.
Yeah. This is fascinating. Let's go to the counterfeiting business, the international counterfeiting business.
The fun stuff.
The fun stuff, right? The billions and billions of notes, counterfeited notes that are printed in various countries around the world and circulated throughout the global economy. What does a cashless society do to that hugely profitable industry?
Well, it would be hard to make a lot of money as a counterfeiter of physical objects if those objects don't exist anymore.
You can't counterfeit plastic easily.
Right, right. Now, certainly there is financial crime in the digital realm. There's certainly credit card fraud. But you're putting a lot of people out of business by getting rid of cash, or even the high denomination notes. You make life a lot harder for them. The good news for all of us, in the year 2012, is that most of the money supply is clean and authentic, and you don't have to get too worried about getting stuck with old maid. But having said that, there are some very worrisome developments out there, especially because the North Koreans, it looks like, have the capacity to manufacture what government officials call a super dollar, because it's such a high quality counterfeit. It's essentially not a counterfeit. It's a US $100 bill that happens not to be made here. And at first, the idea was that the North Koreans were going to use this to undermine the U.S. economy and the U.S. dollar.
Flood the global market with it.
It's garbage, though. They could never make enough to have any significant impact. And the much more mundane reason that they're counterfeiting, it looks like, is because they need to buy stuff. And the North Korean won is a terrible, borderline worthless currency. And so if you want to buy a Rolls Royce or cognac for Dear Leader or Dear Leader Jr., you need greenbacks. But having said all that, there is still also the concern that they use some of this fake U.S. currency to buy or procure illicit materials that could be used to harm us or our allies. So, pretty serious stuff that, again, if you outlawed $150 bills tomorrow, we wouldn't have to worry about what Dear Leader Jr. is buying with them.
So apart from having the ability to be an effective crime fighter, a cashless society also can create economic efficiencies that could lead to higher productivity, that could then lead to a reduction in poverty rates, etc. Are you arguing along those macro levels as
Absolutely, well? Absolutely. And let's go back to the mobile money discussion for a moment, because we're talking about this idea of building financial stability in your life. The other huge benefit to this mobile money technology, which is sort of business speak for essentially texting money back and forth between people, is this area of remittances. Because throughout the world, people, usually in urban areas, are earning money and sending it to family members elsewhere, either in the countryside or overseas.
In the case of some Central American countries, remittances account for almost 50% of GDP.
Exactly. Huge numbers. It's like $320 billion a year is zipping around the globe as people share money. Well, one gentleman that I interview in the book is an electronics repairman outside of Delhi. He makes almost nothing, but what he does make, he gathers together carefully, and then he eventually delivers to family members in the countryside. Up until a few months ago, this meant a 3-day round-trip bus fare, and 3 days away from income generation, paying another guy to look after his shop, worrying that his money stored in a tea canister in his apartment was going to be lifted. Oh my goodness. All of that, just to get the money to his family members. Now he has one of these mobile banking accounts. So he walks across the street from his shop, he puts the cash on the counter, there's a quick exchange of text messages with the merchant. It's actually a pharmacy, but this pharmacist is now basically selling bank accounts in a way through the State Bank of India, etc. Now this young man can text that money to his family members in the countryside. And
the money gets transferred securely.
The money gets transferred securely.
In a shorter period of time, in less than 24 hours.
Almost instantly. So the family member in the countryside gets a text message that says, you have new value delivered to you by dawn, go collect it. And so the family member wanders to the local agent in this network, and again, a couple of quick text messages and it's over. Or instead of redeeming the value in paper money, they say, well, I just received 500 rupees from so-and-so in the city. But instead of redeeming all of that, but instead of cashing out, I'd first like to buy some flour and sugar and cooking oil, and then I just want to cash out 200 rupees. Because, lo and behold, that agent is also engaged in this form of electronic money commerce.
Tied into the system.
And so you see cash being pushed further and further to the margins. It's not irrelevant. It's still part of this equation, but think of how early we are in this endeavor of mobile money.
Now, in a cashless society, in a society driven by the use of plastic, credit cards, debit cards, etc. Don't you worry about privacy concerns in such a society?
That's only one of my worries. Capital P, privacy, I worry about a lot. But I think we need to worry about that today. I don't know why we need to wait for the cashless future to demand more robust regulation when it comes to privacy. Mm-hmm. So yes, that worries me. What also worries me, and you were talking about credit cards, and even though credit money in electronic is just one form of electronic money, mm-hmm. it's what everybody thinks about. As soon as you say, let's kill cash, they say, no, no.
David, let me stop you there for a minute.
Sure.
You have a fascinating definition of what money is. I mean, it's sort of a very low-level intellectual type of question. What is money? I mean, people kind of laugh at you because everybody knows what money is. But you have a much more intricate definition of what money is. Can you share some of that with us?
Sure. And it's not mine per se, but as a journalist and not an economist, it was rather eye-opening to travel the world asking people, well, what is money and how does it work? And you can look up in a textbook, it will tell you that money is a medium of exchange or mm-hmm. a store of value or unit of account.
Right, that's sort of the standard definition.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So what is money? Well, money is an idea. And anything can serve the role of money if those who are participating in a transaction believe it is money. If you and I now think that cups mm-hmm. or toothbrushes or giant stones, this is a currency we want to transact with, that's money. It will be a store of value. It will mediate an exchange between us when I'm buying a car or a sofa. And that scares a lot of people. The almighty dollar or the greenback, what gives it worth? What makes a dollar a dollar?
Right. Right.
And of course the answer to that is our faith that it's valuable and that we can use it for something.
Yeah.
But there's no there. And
exactly.
that sprinkle of religious language over the topic of money in the monetary system, I've noticed it really scares the pants out of a lot of people.
David, we're going to have to wrap this conversation up, but this has been fascinating. I think we could go on for a few more hours talking about The End of Money, which is the title of David Wolman's book, The End of Money. And we want to remind you that you can go to freespeech.org, or you can give us a call at 877-378-8669 and make a secure donation to Free Speech TV. The number again is 877-378-8669, and the website is freespeech.org. David, thank you so much for dropping by our studios.
My pleasure.
And we are going to be offering signed copies of your book to those who call us and make a pledge at this particular time. Thanks a lot, and good luck with the rest of your tour.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Colleen Finnerty from the Development Department, and I'm welcoming you here to Pledge Drive. You're outside of our amazing studios here in 5 Points at 2900 Welton Street in Denver. And I'm so thrilled to be able to offer this gift. You've just finished watching David Wolman's interview with our Executive Director, Don Rojas. And now, if you call in at the $125 level, you can get a signed copy of David Wolman's new book, The End of Money. If you're a little confused, or if you have more questions about everything that they talked about during their interview, you can find all of the answers here inside of this book. Again, he was very generous. He stayed, he signed copies of the book, he talked a little bit more about the book, and it's extremely fascinating to hear about what everything that we do with money, you sort of take it for granted and you don't really understand what the cost of money actually is. And this book details all of that. And again, for a generous donation of $125, we will send you a signed copy of The End of Money. This is a very exciting time for us. We're building off of the Occupy the Media movement, and then that is our own show that we're producing here inside our studios. And to keep this momentum going for Free Speech TV, we have to hear from you. So please call now, 877-378-8669, or you can donate securely online at freespeech.org and make your donation there. This book is not located on the website, but if you put in the comments section that you would like to receive this book for your donation, we will make sure that it's sent to you. And again, this is how you can keep the strength of Free Speech TV going, is by calling 877-378-8669 and making your donation. And you're probably thinking, you know what, Colleen, that sounds great, but I don't really have $125 just laying around. But you can also donate anything that you can afford. $5, $10, $20 one-time donations. We make that money stretch, trust me. We make every dollar count. So please call in and offer whatever you can, even if it's just $10. $10 you can forfeit maybe buying a couple cups of coffee for the month. And instead you can put that and invest that money into independent media at Free Speech TV. So call 877-378-8669, or again, you can go on at freespeech.org. And please take advantage of this offer. This is the only time that we'll be offering this book, The End of Money. So please call in 877-378-8669 so that you can take advantage of this great offer and get a signed copy from an up-and-coming star. He writes for Wired magazine. He has a lot of really interesting viewpoints, and I had the pleasure of being able to talk to him a little bit more after the interview, where he noted that people here on our side of things, progressives, independents, whatever it is that you want to call ourselves, we have a really hard time working together for a cause. We don't see the GOP fighting amongst their ranks, saying, you think this, I think this. Everybody works together on their end, and we need to start doing the same thing. And I think one of those key ways that we can do that is if we all invest in independent media. Instead of having the corporate voice reign over all of us, we need to work together. We need to have a consistent voice that we know we can depend on, that we know doesn't cow to corporate or government people, our overlords, telling us what it is that we need to think, what it is we need to believe, and instead that we can invest in this type of media that we know has our back, that we know is telling us the stories that we need to hear. That number again is 877-378-8669, and again, you can log on directly at freespeech.org. Please do check out our newly vamped website. We just invested some money into this completely new website that we've done. You can watch all of our media on our player that's on the website. You can make your donations right there securely, and you can check out all the new pages that we've offered on our website. It's actually a lot of fun and it looks really great. So please, we need to hear from you. If independent media is something that you value, if you want to hear more about the end of money, then we need to hear from you. So please, and you can go ahead and go to our website, freespeech.org. You can make your donations securely there. Again, check out our amazing revamped website, and you can call in 877-378-8669 and talk to one of our lovely volunteers who are working just for this pledge drive. They want to hear from you. They want to get your donations. They want to get your feedback. What is it that you love about Free Speech TV? What programming would you like to see on our channel? All of these types of things. And again, if you want to donate the $125 level to get the end of money, you can do that by calling or going online at freespeech.org.